You probably didn't know that a man who once calmly lectured college students about the human mind had already destroyed his own family long before he ever stepped into a classroom. This is the story of James Gordon Wolcott, a teenage family annihilator who vanished into the mental health system and later re-emerged as a respected psychology professor under a new name. In August of 1967, the quiet town of Georgetown, Texas woke up to a nightmare no one could explain. Inside a modest family home, police discovered a scene that would haunt the community for decades. James Gordon Wolcott was only 15 years old when he murdered his entire immediate family. His father, his mother, and his teenage sister. There were no signs of forced entry, no robbery, no struggle that suggested an outsider. Everything pointed inward, toward the boy who had been living under that roof. Wolcott didn't run. He didn't try to hide what he had done. When questioned, his demeanor was unsettlingly calm. He spoke without panic, without visible remorse, and without the emotional reaction people expect from someone who has just committed an unthinkable act. Investigators quickly realized this was not a crime driven by rage in the usual sense. Something deeper, darker, and far more disturbing was at play. According to court records and psychiatric evaluations, Wolcott believed his family was conspiring against him. He claimed they were trying to poison him, control him, or destroy his mind. These beliefs were not momentary paranoia, they were part of a growing pattern of delusion that had gone unnoticed or untreated. In his mind, the murders were not crimes. They were acts of self-defense. The case shocked Texas, not only because of the brutality, but because of Wolcott's age. A 15-year-old had wiped out his own family, and the legal system now had to decide whether he was a cold-blooded killer or a severely mentally ill child. At trial, psychiatrists diagnosed Wolcott with paranoid schizophrenia. Expert testimony described a boy detached from reality, ruled by delusions and internal voices. The court ultimately ruled him not guilty by reason of insanity. Instead of prison, Wolcott was committed to Rusk State Hospital, a psychiatric facility where he would remain for several years. To the public, it felt unfinished. 3 lives were gone, yet there was no traditional sentence, no prison time, no sense of closure. And then, slowly, the story faded. James Gordon Wolcott disappeared from public view. Years passed, then decades. When Wolcott was released, he did something that would later ignite public outrage. He changed his name. He became James St. James. Under this new identity, he enrolled in college, studied psychology, and eventually earned advanced degrees. No one around him knew who he really was or what he had done. By the time he reached adulthood, James St. James was no longer a patient or a defendant. He was a professor. He went on to teach psychology at a university, standing in front of classrooms full of young students, lecturing about mental illness, behavior, and the human psyche. To colleagues, he was intelligent, articulate, and deeply knowledgeable. To students, he was just another professor, strict at times, thoughtful at others, but never someone they suspected carried a past soaked in blood. For years, his secret held. What makes this story especially chilling is the irony. A man who once claimed delusions drove him to murder his family now spent his life analyzing the minds of others. Some would later ask whether he understood mental illness because he had studied it or because he had lived it in the most violent way imaginable. The truth finally resurfaced decades later, when journalists investigating historical insanity defense cases uncovered Wolcott's past. When the story broke, it sent shockwaves through the academic world. Students and faculty were stunned. Parents were horrified. Many asked the same question: how could this have been allowed to happen? Legally, Wolcott, now St. James, had done nothing wrong after his release. He had not reoffended. He had complied with treatment. He had followed the law. But morally, the debate exploded. Should someone who murdered his family, regardless of mental illness, ever be allowed to quietly reinvent himself? Should the public have been informed? And can true rehabilitation erase an act like that? James St. James eventually resigned from his position once his identity became public. Interviews revealed a man who remained composed, distant, and careful with his words. He acknowledged the killings, but framed them through the lens of illness rather than responsibility. To many, that explanation felt insufficient. To others, it was proof of how complex and uncomfortable the insanity defense truly is. This case continues to divide opinion. Some see Wolcott as a tragic example of untreated mental illness in a young boy. Others see a system that failed to protect both his victims and the public. And some believe his later success exposes a chilling truth that someone can commit unimaginable violence and still find a way to live a respected life, as long as time and paperwork bury the past. In the end, 3 people never got a second chance. Their lives ended in silence, while the person who killed them went on to teach others about the mind. And that leaves us with the question that has no easy answer. Can a monster truly become something else? Or do they simply learn how to hide better? If you found the story disturbing, thought-provoking, or eye-opening, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the darkest corners of true crime. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay curious, but stay safe.